Right, hello everybody. It's Wednesday, 15th of July. Thanks for joining us. You're here for the Exercise Park Wednesday Digitech chat over lunch. We call them brown bag lunches. We are recording this session and I said I'm going to start really promptly because we've got some great content today. So just a bit of a recap. So normally I've got my co-host Dan Pritchard, who's not able to be with me today. So Dan's from an organisation called Tech Southwest, and then I represent the Digital Skills Partnership, and between the two of us we're kind of really connected with the digital and kind of wider business sector across the southwest, and we're kind of particularly interested in surfacing the interesting stories around skills, around innovation. So that's what we do on these Wednesday webinars. Quick bit of housekeeping. So it's going to be a presentation format today. There's a chat window down the right hand side, so feel free to let us know you're here, say hello to each other. If you've got any questions, I'll keep an eye on that and I'll bring those back to the presenters. We're not going to be doing a poll today, but this session is recorded, so that's the housekeeping done and dusted. So now it's time to introduce my guests. We've got two great guests today. Really excited for this chat that we're going to have. So we've got Stuart, who's with us from Stuart Cochrane, who's head of operations from Numatic. Numatic, for those of you that you may, I'm sure you do all know, that the Henry and Hetty vacuums. But did you know that Numatic are in Chard in Somerset? Did you know they make 1 million of them a year? And did you know that more recently they've also, their team of kind of adapted processes and produced, I think it's 300,000 PPE masks for the NHS that can go in the dishwasher, so they're recyclable, reusable, and apparently the most comfy PPE visors that NHS staff are wearing. So that's great to hear. And then my second guest, really excited that Nicola Dillion is with us today. Nicola is the local and regional strategic account director for Microsoft, and she covers a huge patch ranging from Gloucestershire all the way down to Cornwall, and she's got some great insights about automation within local authorities and also within the private sector that she's going to be sharing with us today. So hi to both the guests. Topic. So this is the topic. So 41% of businesses surveyed have said that they're speeding up their automation plans. And what I'm kind of keen to look at is, are we here in the Southwest? Because I don't want us to kind of be not aware of these opportunities and for this kind of to be kind of passing by. And what I particularly don't want to see is a productivity gap widening here in the Southwest. And what I want to kind of do is unpick kind of both where this information's come from, look at how automation and productivity are linked, and then we'll come back to Nicola and Stuart to look at some examples of actually where it is happening in the Southwest. And during all of this, I'd love to hear examples from your own organisation. So if you kind of want to drop any of that in the chat, and perhaps at the end I could create a blog roundup of all the examples shared, both from our guests and from people on the call. So let's just kind of start with what is automation, and I'm going to borrow a quote from Rian Whitten in his essay Automation Anxiety, and he said automation can be defined as the process of applying technology and organisation to do more with less. So that could be applying hardware, so robots or cobots that we're going to come on to talk about, or software. And if you kind of think of a very simple thing that we all use in our everyday, which is our heating thermostat. When the heating thermostat was first introduced, it was a form of automation. It allowed us to set a daily rhythm for our heating to come on in the morning and go off in the evening, rather than manually go and press that button. And this is kind of automated on even further with the kind of the Hive apps of this world, where these apps can even kind of use a mix of your location data and your daily schedule pattern to start turning your heating on when you're nearing your home. And so we can start to understand that automation can take very different forms, very different scales, and have different scales of impact. And back in April this year, The Guardian shared an article on the effect of coronavirus, the effect that coronavirus is having on automation. And it included a survey from Ernst & Young, which they spoke to about 3,000 businesses across 45 countries. And this is a direct quote, and I'll drop it in the chat for you, actually. It said almost half of company bosses in 45, just drop it in the chat. There we go. So you can read it. It said almost half of company bosses in 45 countries are speeding up their plans to automate as workers are forced to stay home during the coronavirus outbreak. And they were saying that they're definitely going to be investing in and accelerating automation as they prepared business for this post-crisis world as we started to move out of lockdown. And we know that there is a direct link between automation and productivity. You just need to Google this topic. Numerous articles and thought leaders that will draw this distinct link between automation and the rise of productivity and therefore economic benefit that comes out of that. And again, I've got a couple of links here that I'll drop in the chat. And what we particularly don't want to happen is, just put this in, there we go. What we particularly don't want to happen is, by kind of our organisations here in the Southwest not getting on board with automation, is for a productivity gap to widen. And there's the Cisco Productivity Index, which was released last year, that I've mentioned on a previous webinar, which astounded me when I went to that launch, and I found that a UK employee produces a third less each hour than their French, German or US counterparts. So this is really something that we can't afford to overlook. And so hopefully that's the kind of the light bulb that we're going to leave with you today. And I'm now going to kind of hand over to Stuart and Nicola, who are going to run through a presentation and share some examples, which thankfully does show you that automation is happening here in the Southwest. And after each, we'll come back, and if you've got questions, we can kind of flip back to our presenters and ask them questions at that point. So I'm just going to bring up Stuart's slides. Just bear with me. There we go. And I'm going to hand over to you, Stuart, if that's okay.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Stuart Cochrane. I'm head of operations of Numatic International. If you don't know much about Numatic International, we were established in 1969. We turn over about £150 million. We export about 40% of our sales, and we have 950 people employed on our site in Chard. And we do all our business activities here. We do research and development, our finance, our admin, our sales, and of course our manufacturing. If you didn't know, Henry is our most famous product, and all the variants of Henry. We build about 1 million of these every year, about 4,500 every day. But one of the interesting things to think about, although people know Henry, we make over 300 variants of that type of product. And so it is quite a small volume manufacture, and that becomes a bit more important when we start to talk about automation. Also, not a lot of people know that we make a broad range of industrial and commercial cleaning equipment. And on top of the 1 million Henry type vacuums we make about another 250,000 units. And that's across a very broad range of about 5,000 products. So again, volume's quite low and variety is quite high for us. We've been thinking about automation for a long time. I sometimes ask the question, are we an endangered species? Because there aren't a lot of factories left in Western Europe making small domestic appliances. So we know that we have to be competitive in a global market. And so productivity has always been a very important agenda for us. And UK productivity is often reported as lagging behind the rest of Western Europe, the rest of Europe. And often the use of automation is cited as the reason why we are lagging behind. So why did we think about automation? The first thing is I, as a head of operations, wanted to offer good value to our commercial organisation. We've been manufacturing here since 1969. We're fully committed to UK manufacturing, but I wanted to make sure that we were committed to UK manufacturing because that was the best option for the business. It wasn't just because we were on the same site as our commercial colleagues. And so quality and cost are really important in that decision for our commercial colleagues. So I wanted to make sure we were delivering the operational performance to support our business. We also had a view that we wanted to make life as good as possible for our employees making our product. It's something we call operator care, and we wanted to make sure that we were kind of extending people's working lives, making sure that people of any age, any capability could be involved in making our product. So that was making manufacturing available to a broad range of people, and that meant lowering the physical demands of manufacture. And that led us towards what we've called, what we were taught to call a Cobot approach, and I'll speak a little bit more about that later on in the program. Most people will have seen automation in car plants, you know, lots of robots making the bodies of cars. And I always think that's kind of the real deal. When you go to places like BMW in Swindon, you might see that, and you see automation systems costing millions and millions of pounds. But they're dealing with something that's relatively stable in terms of the amount of demand and the variation of the product they're doing. Our automation challenge was a bit different, and I just wanted to give you an impression with this slightly weird picture of the stillages that we have in our business. We have about 4,500 of these things around our business, and it's our kind of basic unit of transport of all of the different products that we make. And from that picture of a very small number of them, you can see different products, different shapes, different ways of packaging them, and all of that makes it quite difficult to automate the processes because you've got this level of variability to cope with. So our short production runs meant that our volume and variation was difficult to use normal automation systems, and some of our short product life cycles meant that it meant that we didn't have a lot of time to justify big investment in automation. So we needed a very flexible and adaptable solution. You could argue that we could just subcontract that. And we've always been quite good at pneumatic and mechanical things, perhaps not so good at the automation. So we could see how much the physical bits of an automation system could cost. And when we went to subcontract, we could see that maybe a third of the cost was in the physical bits, a third of the cost was maybe in design, software and profit. But we always thought the quotes looked a third too expensive to us. And I think we found out during the process of us going through automation that what that third of cost was about risk for the companies who were supplying those automation systems. And that risk was down to what we determined was the first time you really do and really understand the variation and the variability in your processes is when you try and automate them. Humans are really good at tweaking things and getting over minor variations in a system. And until you take the humans out of that, you don't really see that variation. So when you start to automate, you really understand the variability in your components, in your current business processes, and even of the systems that you're putting in place. And subcontract companies have to put some risk mitigation cost into their quotes, because when you implement the system, you have to do quite a lot of support to get it running. And we watched some companies who we were working with at the same time really struggle with this element with other customers, and even being threatened as a business because of the cost of supporting those systems. So the way that we went about implementing automation, we did quite a lot of work, quite a lot of research, and we ended up working with the University of West of England and the Bristol Robotics Laboratory through a mechanism called knowledge transfer partnerships, which you might have heard of. When this was our first knowledge transfer partnership, I didn't know that they get graded, but at the end of the process, ours was awarded an outstanding grade for the work that we'd done, which was really good for the team. The knowledge transfer partnership was looking at low cost flexible automation. It was talking about cobot solutions, and that's about working with people, not replacing them. And it was making sure that we were developing an in-house capability, building on our mechanical skills and avoiding that expensive subcontract. And what we also wanted to do was build on a common set of technologies so that we could implement this beyond the knowledge transfer partnership project. So the Cobot approach is really quite simple. We use people to do what they're good at, and that's things like inspection, evaluation, being dexterous and thinking about a product or a process. And we use robots to do what they're good at, which is lifting, repeating, consistency, endurance, going for a long time. And that reduces the complexity of the automation systems and makes them much easier to implement, much quicker to implement, and less costly to implement. To give you a bit of an idea of what a cobot looks like, if you haven't seen one, and I'm going to hope that the technology works for me with this video. This is a cobot picking up a Henry head and trying to put it on the drum, as we call it, the bottom of the vacuum cleaner. And at this point, the operator's forgotten to put the drum there, and instead of the robot just dropping it, it senses that the drum's not there, so it doesn't drop the head onto the bench. The operator remembers to put a drum there, but forgets to take his hand out of the way. But the robot senses that too. and doesn't drop the head and doesn't crush his hand. When everything's right, and the drum's there and the operator's hand's not there, the robot drops the head. And this means, hopefully I can get back to my slides. This is a new robot technology. It's been around for a few years now, but it's less than £20,000, and it's got all of that intelligence built into it. So we can build these systems close to our people without huge cages, huge perspex screens. They can be programmed by non-specialists, and it allows the operator to avoid the lifting process and concentrate on the testing process, which uses their skills better. We needed to build that in-house. We couldn't just rely on doing this once through a knowledge transfer partnership. So we wanted to build an in-house capability. So our knowledge transfer partnership team worked with our current employees. We employed staff to work around them, and we developed systems with that team and with our apprentices. And it's quite a boring picture, but it's a picture of a test station that we developed alongside our knowledge transfer partnership with our team. That test station went from concept to shop floor in less than 4 months, and it assists in a repetitive quality assessment. So sometimes we're looking for the quality of the eyes and the print, and that we've got the drum color right. And when you're making thousands of these, it really helps if you've got somebody looking for that as well. And we used a camera system to do that. The camera, in the time that it took us to develop it, went from storing 40 programs to 1,000 programs and costing less in those 4 months. And again, this reinforces our Cobot approach, because if you can imagine trying to get a robot to plug in different variations of plugs for different countries and to switch on where we have different combinations of switching, plugging something in and switching on is really difficult for a robot, but a human copes with that really, really easily. And so again, intuitively, we're using people to do it, and it's reducing our cost of automation. In terms of engagement with our employees, we made sure we were communicating with them right through the process, so they saw all of our prototypes, knew what was coming along. They were involved in the concept design of the automation systems, and it helped us improve them. We were making sure that we made their work easier, and we weren't replacing them, and we were trying to make it a better place for them to work than they were currently working in. And essentially, we put one line in 2017 as a result of the KTP project, and we've installed 2 further lines. The impact for us, essentially as a business, we've gained between 20 and 45% on our key products in terms of productivity, which is great for the business. And for our employees, every year we've eliminated 5 million manual screwdriver operations and 2 million lifting and turning operations, which makes the place a better place for them to work in. So I put a little link. The Bristol Robotics Laboratory did a short video of our project implementing the first line, so you can watch that outside of this. But essentially, that's how we've implemented automation here at Numatic.
Sorry, I was trying to get myself off mute there. That's great, Stuart. I hope everyone has found that as interesting as I think it is, and there's some great stories there. We're going to hold on questions actually, and we're going to go to Nicola. But if people have got questions, if you kind of hold them up, and then if people can kind of stay on for 5 minutes at the end, we can come back for those if that's okay. So I'm just a bit conscious of time. Nicola, shall I flip into your slides? Let's have a look. There we go.
Thank you.
And I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Charlotte, for inviting me today. I think it goes without saying that 2020 has been quite an unfathomable change, both good and bad, for all of us. And I've got some examples of transformation and innovation that I think will be of interest to people. As the pandemic has been central to transformation, specifically in the public sector, I'm going to start there. When we think about transformation, we all have a role to play. McKinsey's and others have been talking about this for a very long time, us as well. But responsibility doesn't mean instigating. And in 2020, I think you'll all agree that from a technology perspective, IT technology perspective, this role has definitely fallen to COVID. Our CEO, Satya Nadella, says that institutions have actually gone through 2 years of change in 2 months, which is a significant amount of change. And coronavirus specifically has accelerated the need for innovation. You know, organisations need to serve their citizens and their customers better, flexibly, wherever they work. Work is no longer somewhere you go, it's just something you do. We need to be able to deliver better services across multiple layers of responsibility. And also customer confidence and citizen confidence sits with security, and knowing that the systems that organisations are using for transformation are secure, and therefore their data and interactions and everything that goes along with that is also secure. Organisations have embraced the change, absolutely, without doubt, and agility and automation has actually been key to that journey. When I think of automation, I mean, the great examples from Stuart have been wonderful to see, the robots, but when I think of automation, I do think of robots, but we think of them as something called virtual workers. So the great thing about a virtual worker is they don't sleep, they don't go on holiday, they don't get ill, they don't make mistakes. They do the same thing over and over and over. It's all about repetition. But it's also about removing the repetitive elements of work for an individual and providing employees with more time to do more rewarding work and higher value work, which we know is better for mental well-being. And we certainly see it within our own organisation. And so here are a few examples that have come up since COVID has been part of our lives. If we look at states of Jersey, BCP and Kent, they've all leveraged our technology recently to run things like their parliament, the democratic process through remote council meetings. They use something called Teams. Some of you may have heard of it. We've certainly done a bit of a song and dance about it in the press recently. The great thing about that is actually allowing the digital democracy to take place. Government had to pass a law for that to be the case, but they did it, and it's meant that we've been able to continue as a society and as our councillors to do their job that we employ them to do. That's one great story. Jersey held debates and proposed legislation online, which was great. Members of the public could log on and watch the proceedings, which, you know, at the moment is absolutely something we should be doing. Because of the way the automation works within the solution, it means that subtitles in Portuguese and Polish were able to be catered for. 10% of the population, specifically in Jersey, are Portuguese and Polish. And all the inclusivity and accessibility capability also built into our platform, this is Microsoft Teams, allows for individuals who may have non-visible and visible disabilities to also be part of the process. Kent County Council use it for live events, which is fantastic. BCP, more close to our hearts, they moved all of their customer service team to using Microsoft Teams during COVID. They were actually working in the office for a time, but they managed to deploy it within a couple of days and sent everybody home, which was fantastic. A little bit further away, Salford and London Borough of Croydon, they use virtual hubs to help people connect with disabilities. We all know that isolation during lockdown has been a real thing. I know I felt it as a mum, and I'm in a busy house, but I still felt isolated. But using technology to allow for those cloud and coffee shop type conversations. I know Salford used it for baby social online sessions, which was amazing. Retaining information and retaining those sharing of information during the course of those sessions just provided real value to those individuals. There's been a wellbeing chat service, which is great. The great thing about chat is even though you're within an environment and you're sending messages to each other, that chat can be retained based on a certain set of principles and rules and shared with others, so you don't have to go repeating it, you don't have to go and churn it out again. And the amazing thing is they also used it for welfare rights and debt advice, which was fantastic, where individuals and residents were seeking advice and guidance. One of my true favourites is the work that Somerset County Council have done with their Discharge to Assess app, D2A. This was actually to respond to a need for increased hospital beds, which I'm sure you can all understand, and ensure the ability that those beds were freed up quickly. So there were multiple people involved in this. Somerset actually used their reporting they were already getting from something we call Power BI. So this is where we gather data from multiple systems, no matter what silos within an organisation, and provide insight. So Somerset used those to give the output to give to their design team to create this app. And what this app does is part of a coordination between different providers, so many different care providers, to identify the capacity for patients to leave the hospitals. So where do they go next? What support do they need from the adult social care system? And that new app provides a live view which care providers can access. Interestingly, in the past, you're probably wondering how it was managed. Well, it was managed with multiple phone calls and multiple spreadsheets. So it's amazing, amazing success. And it literally took 2 days to get up and running. Remember what I said about agility? This is key. And the automation actually associated with that is obviously how the information flows from one care provider to another, or from the hospital, the NHS, through to the council. The last one I'd like to mention very quickly is Swansea. So Swansea Council were looking at how they can respond to the Charity Refuge reporting that there'd been a increase in calls to their helpline by 60%, and visitors to their homepage by over 1,000% for people seeking help. We were asked to get involved, and we supported them creating what we call a virtual agent to help people who have concerns and to get help discreetly. So it's not a 999 replacement. That's not what we're trying to do. This allows for citizens to engage 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to get help and to stay safe. The bot is actually placed within a council's website. It's called Angela, as you can see on the screen. It can be customised wherever. Both Swansea Council and Swansea Police are utilising this together. It provides information about local services as the bot works through a series of questions following the dash terminology. It completes a risk assessment. It has a covert mode. We all know that individuals that are suffering from domestic violence, the accuser tends to be quite creative. So there is a covert mode. So if an individual asks for the weather, that automatically knows that the individual is in crisis and is seeking immediate support. There's a clear function, so you can remove all history of this conversation. So if your mobile phone is in the hands of somebody, the accuser, then actually there won't be any visibility of this conversation taking place. And actually the bot is very clever. It utilizes emotional sentiment, so the use of certain words and terminology, to decide what the next right question should be. It's an amazing thing. It took an hour to build. It's the information that's retained within it is shared with the next part of the process. So, for example, if an individual says, yes, can please put me in touch with Women's Aid, the connection happens automatically, and the information that's been gathered as part of the DASH assessment is provided. So there's no additional human intervention in terms of providing that information. I know it's basic workflow, but at the end of the day, basic workflow is a form of automation, and sharing information, speeding up that process of sharing information, means that you can support an individual in crisis quicker. Just switching industries very slightly, FABLETICS, some of you may have heard of it. I know they're not local to the Southwest, but I thought it was a really good example to share. So this wasn't driven by COVID, but they were always an online reseller of clothes, specifically sports clothes. And interestingly, they decided to open a couple of physical stores because they couldn't work out whether or not they were getting value from just being online. What they wanted to understand was what were people doing when they were inside a store that they could draw conclusions from, individuals being at home. So, for example, what were individuals taking into a changing room, and then consequently, what were they buying? So what they did was they put sensors within the changing rooms, not to monitor a human being or their physical build or anything like that. It was detecting what units, so what colours different colours, different tops an individual was taking in, and then which ones they were subsequently buying, to see if there was definitely an issue with certain colours they were producing or certain styles. They've got 22 physical stores that they now do this in, and it's actually providing them huge amounts of insight. And merging that with the online browsing data has meant that Fabletics can work out actually what they should and shouldn't be buying and should and shouldn't be stocking. It's been fantastic for them. The automation activity, specifically, obviously, around the supply chain reorder process. And as a consequence, that is saving them significant amounts of money. And then the last one, which I'm sure most of you will be very familiar with, because I know I am, and I've been missing Starbucks like anything, is Starbucks has connected devices. So if we think about their coffee machines, I don't know if you've noticed the difference between Starbucks and Costa. I obviously facilitate coffee shops a lot. Costa, the barista, actually makes everything. So, puts the coffee in as we've seen them done, decaf, normal, then they will get the right milk, etc., etc. Starbucks is a lot more automated. So there's part of an automation. The machine itself has been programmed to do certain recipes. In the past, that would have had to have been done manually, like the guys in Costa. But Starbucks, a lot of that responsibility is taken away from them. And that's because the recipe is automatically pushed to all of the coffee machines. In addition to that, there's something called Azure Sphere. It's one of our many cloud products. And what that does is detecting if there's issues or potential issues about to hit those machines, so they can automatically put in a request for an engineer to site before anything goes wrong with the device. It sounds so super futuristic when I think about it, but things are no longer breaking down. I know now you'll be looking at Starbucks if you're in there and see a broken down machine in future and think, Microsoft, you've not done a very good job there. But essentially, that's how it should work. Whilst huge amounts have changed and huge amounts of transformation has happened, and automation is absolutely making a significant difference, we can't be complacent. We should reflect and celebrate and then move on and think about what we do next as part of our journey, because this is something that will continue to grow. You may or may not be aware that Microsoft has made specific announcements over the past couple of weeks around how we're going to try and support a massive program around skilling. There's huge amounts of many people across many countries that have lost their jobs due to COVID. We also know that there are huge amounts of different roles within the world that aren't being fulfilled because the skills just don't exist. As a consequence of that, we are running a specific program. I know I talk in dollars on this slide. I have taken it from the standard deck, but there is a UK version of this, and Charlotte's kindly dropping links into the chat so you can go off and check yourself. But the key here is we've got a lot to do, and there's some examples here. So the first one is skilling from a job seeker's perspective. How can Microsoft help? We have now put into LinkedIn, I know we mentioned it earlier, a load of free courses for job seekers to help them get some additional skills and to seek contacts. So there is a link that Charlotte's kindly dropped in that would take you to that. Please feel free, by the way, to share this with anyone. This is all free, all the stuff I'm talking about right now. The second one is around these tools to help employers skill and upskill their employees from a technical perspective. By the way, I would add here, we're aware that huge amounts of people are being made redundant in the Southwest, have been made redundant in the Southwest. I'm working quite closely at the moment with Honda, BMW and Nationwide. I live relatively close to Swindon, so there are 3 organisations that have dropped employees. So we're trying to get them skilled up and look at maybe getting new skills. There's something called Microsoft Learn. Microsoft Learn is free, it's on demand. You can get a basic level of understanding about certain technologies, or you could go through all the levels right to certification and end up with a badge that you can post on LinkedIn and hopefully get an associate architect job. So it's very in-depth, or it can be very light depending on what you're seeking. The last one is apprenticeships. We've recently had a huge announcement around our apprenticeship program. It's just launched. That's apprenticeships to join Microsoft, but also we have 50,000 partners in the UK, and we have hundreds of thousands of customers in the UK, from the largest to the smallest, and they are also seeking apprenticeships. So it's skills about apprenticeships. Again, Charlotte's dropped that link in. And obviously this is all about, if we think about where we started this conversation regarding automation and how technology is evolving, from a technical perspective, ICT perspective, we need those skills. We need people learning those skills today. So thank you for your time. If you have got any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you both. Thank you, Stuart, and thank you, Nicola. I think we've packed an awful lot into that 30 minutes, and apologies, we have gone slightly over, so I hope you're still with us. I think kind of what the kind of key takeaway there for me is that automation, yes, it is around kind of increasing productivity, but it's also kind of a turnkey to access well-being, better access, connectivity, safety. It goes much further than productivity. It's about adding value with what we're good at as humans, using our intuition, and taking away those 5 million manual screwdriving efforts that were happening. So if anybody has got questions, please drop them in the chat. I'm also going to put in Stuart and Nicola's. I've got their permission to drop in their LinkedIn profiles, so you can connect with them direct if you don't want to ask a question in this forum. And we'll just kind of hang on a couple of minutes to see if anyone pops a question into the box, and if not, we'll let everyone go and get on with your day. Yeah. Well, while we're waiting, I'll just drop those profile links in.
I think Ariane's posted something under Q&A.
Okay, can you let me post this one in, let's have a look. Okay. Do you think coronavirus pandemic has accelerated businesses adopting with automation technology, with some staff being furloughed or made redundant, and businesses having to operate in a more streamlined way? Or do you know of any data or research? There's quite a lot in there, so I think we've definitely highlighted some examples of where it is happening. I mean, Stuart, actually, if I could come back to you, do you think at Numatic will is this on your kind of digital strategy more than it was pre-COVID?
I think we had an automation strategy for longer, and it's been important to us for a while. The COVID hasn't actually made that much difference to us within the operations environment, within the factory environment. But I would wholeheartedly endorse what Nicola's saying about Teams was something that was kind of in the periphery of our organisation in January, and is now something that we run our organisation with. So our uptake of Teams, enabling people to work away from the factory, work from home, has been absolutely critical for our business performance in the last 4 months.
I'll let you come in there, Nicola.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just to pick up on the automation and COVID and people being furloughed and made redundant, I don't see, or we don't believe automation from an ICT perspective has driven increased numbers of redundancies as a consequence of taking automation. What we hear from our customers is actually leveraging automation in their daily processes, which actually frees up individuals from doing the really boring, repetitive, rubbish tasks that, I don't know about you, but when I was when I first went into work environment, that's the kind of job I did and was soul destroying. So it's freeing them up to doing more high value work that actually is better for their human capability. So that's what we're seeing. So when we talk about automation and the productivity or efficiency gains within an organization, it's never about this is going to replace, you can get rid of 10 people. It's about you're now going to have extra hours and capability for individuals to do more high value work, to be good at what they are good at, to make the decisions, to do the interpretation, because that still needs to be done, right? Automation is about getting rid of the dross and leaving that quality stuff that humans are good at to get on and do. So I haven't seen that impact an increased number of redundancies. Thank God.
That's where the skills piece comes in as well, isn't it? It's about it sometimes is about kind of changing a job role and taking your employees with you so that they have the skills to be part of that co-design and the future workplace. I think that's the really important bit. I'm really conscious of time. I thank you very much, Stuart and Nicola. It's been amazing, the stories and insights that you've shared. I'm really, really, grateful for the time you put into preparing that and joining us today. Going to say goodbye. Going to say thanks to everyone for listening, and don't forget to go back to the Exeter Science Park website, where you can find out what the next up and coming webinars are, and in I think it's about 24 hours you'll be able to get a recording of this session there too.